Hey guys, welcome back for another episode of The Suited Shootist. And there is a long line of courses that are grossly overdue for AARs, and that is what I'm going to be working on getting out over the course of the next couple months. I'm not just going to bury you guys in nothing but course reviews, but I'm going to be focused a little bit more heavily on that because honestly, I feel like I owe it to these guys to give you an idea of what the coursework is like. And so today I'm going to start that with the ECQC Combatives class from Green Ops taught by John Valentine. I took this last year in June, and it is a great one-day course. My standard format for this, I'm going to talk about what it is, what it isn't, and then the shamelessly plagiarized 3x3 that I took from the Short-Barreled Shepherd. So what the class is, most concisely, I think is the best way to describe it is a more in-depth version of the live fire block from ECQC. Because obviously Craig's got 2.5 days to get a ton of information out there, and he certainly doesn't gloss over anything, but time constraints being what they are, John has the ability to go in a lot more depth in sort of the execution and explanation of the concepts that come into play for that. The big ones are going to be that thumb pectoral index, as well as the extension and compression of the pistol at various close distances, both of which are critical components to close-in defensive shooting. The other thing that it is a good kind of technical tune-up type of class, because you are doing some shooting at distance, and so you have the option and ability to kind of evaluate and make sure that you got things really dialed in well. What it's not is, this would not be the very first class that I would necessarily take somebody to, because there's a good amount of holster work. And so if you're going to go, you don't necessarily have to be particularly fast, but you need to be reasonably accurate, because otherwise you're going to be struggling kind of holding the class back. And you need to be at least familiar with holster work, because again, otherwise that is just going to drag the tempo of the class down. So jumping into the 3x3, the three major aspects that were addressed in this class. One of them was, again, the thumb pectoral index, which is arguably the most critical piece of entangled gunfighting. And without really trying to teach that curriculum myself, to give you an idea, the thumb pectoral index is a shooting position that was codified by Craig Douglas in his ShivWorks curriculum. And the idea is it creates a physical reference point for entangled shooting that, number one, makes it easier for you to control and maintain control of the pistol, as well as have a reasonable idea of muzzle orientation without visual reference. And so, as such, when you have somebody that's physically on top of you, you are not risking shooting through them into yourself or somebody else, and even, there's a whole lot of benefits and why behind it that I'm not going to touch on, because honestly, that's something that you need to learn in a class, whether it be ECQC or whether it be this one, or I know Cecil Birch does his close contact handgun as well. So there's plenty of opportunity out there to learn the thumb pectoral index and the why behind it. But as you would imagine, that is a major component of this course. Another piece of it that interestingly isn't covered in Craig's class, understandably, was we did some shooting at 25 yards, which is beneficial because that helps you diagnose certain things that you may not necessarily be aware of or may not reveal themselves at closer distance. So that is something that I really appreciate because of the pistol classes that I've taken, a few of them have gone to distance, but not all of them. And it is a good skill set to have. The third major focus of the class is really driving in on the appropriate compression or extension of the pistol, depending on where you are in relation to the target. Because again, when you're talking about the types of shootings in a civilian defender capacity that you typically encounter, it's generally something roughly about a car's length. And if you have somebody encroaching on you, if you happen to already have the pistol out, or if the pistol has come out and you have somebody still advancing on you, you don't want to leave it out there and have it become community property. There are as well some focuses on draw methodology and some tweaking and some tips and tricks for grip and trigger management, but there's not major dedicated blocks of that. So that's something to bear in mind is while this is it's a technical shooting class insofar as there's not, there's no force on force, but I guess more appropriately, it is application of technical shooting. So I'm not going to go so far as to call it tactics per se, but it's not necessarily going to help you refine your shooting. It is going to give you a good sense of when certain things are appropriate to utilize. It's kind of the best way I can describe it. My three biggest takeaways from the class were, at that point, and mind you, this is about 8 months ago now, and again, sorry, John, I should have gotten to this sooner. My biggest takeaways from the class were, number one, I really do need to be working more on my grip. And if you saw my Instagram post from yesterday, you'll see that that is very much forefront in my mind at this point as I'm coming up on the tactical conference and the Rangemaster class. But the big takeaway there was I needed to refine my grip. And aside from that, the other two big takeaways for me were that I really will benefit from spending a little bit more time shooting at distance, but not just necessarily slow fire shooting at distance, because if I'm basically taking just 10 completely independent shots that are so far divorced from each other that they're single shots and not a string of fire, I'm great. Well, I'm good. But as I try to tighten that into a single string of fire, things start to degrade a little bit. And so making sure that I'm spending the appropriate amount of time at distance to not allow myself to get sloppy. The third one that I realized partially during the course of that class, that was kind of on the front end of me coming to the understanding that stock Glock triggers for me exacerbate an issue that I have. Part of it is a psychological issue where I don't trust myself and I don't have enough faith in my abilities, and so I'm overly cautious in my first shot to ensure that I'm not going to miss it. And the problem is that gives me enough time to feel the wall of a stock Glock trigger and kind of slam through it, which results in a combination of kind of milking the grip and a pre-ignition flinch. So this was one of the main kind of takeaways that I got. I was like, okay, it's a me issue, but there are outside contributing factors that are allowing me, that are cueing me to do that. So the three things that I did differently after this class. One of them was I spent more time in dry practice, and that was really kind of working the hand speed. because I was also very tense in the upper back and shoulders. And that's something that it took a while for me to break this habit of, is trying to... I just swept my hand. That's not cool. I'm going to leave that in. So working the hand speed so that it's not something I have to think about, and so that I'm not binding myself up and making the shooting process more difficult. Focusing more on that grip is certainly another one that has been a continued focus of mine. And then thirdly, this was one of the first classes that I was running with my Boresight 19, and kind of in that same spirit, not being shy of appropriate modifications to my gear to make my life easier. Not trying to buy skill, not trying to compensate for laziness, but in the same time, there's no sense just because I got a pebble in my shoe, I mean I have to leave it there. So if you are considering taking this class, and interestingly enough, he's doing something similar here in a couple weeks out in Katy, Texas. It's a 2-day. One day is going to be on the range, one day is going to be dedicated grappling, and hopefully I can kind of make an appearance and drop in and see how that goes. But if you have taken ECQC or you want to take ECQC or another one of those kind of combative-oriented classes, this is a great option for that, because you get a lot more time on the range with the live fire port of it, and it's a combination of developing those skills and understanding, sort of subconsciously gauging distance so you know where to keep the pistol, as well as just more validation of what the gun does on paper at these various distances and at various speeds. So realistically, if you are at all a hobbyist shooter, and if you've got a class or two under your belt, I would get on the Green Ops website, see when it's near you, and really do strongly recommend picking it up and checking it out. Now, full disclosure, I did not pay full ride for this. I was John's guest, but that in no way influences my opinion on the class. If I thought that it wasn't something that people would benefit from, quite frankly, I wouldn't make the video. So if you have any questions about it, let me know down in the comments. I'll put the link to the upcoming Katy class down there as well, so that if you are around the Houston area and want to check it out, then by all means do so. Aside from that, hope everybody has a fantastic week. Stay dangerous and stay sharp.